Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to WatchBox, and thanks for logging on. If you're not watching this on the new WatchBox app, you're doing it all wrong. New features available on the Apple App Store or Google Play. You'll see WatchBox Studios content 1 week early, exclusive on the app. Plus, you can read editorial content from our own Jack Foster and your favorite third-party watch journals, magazines, and blogs. Also, shop our inventory, browse 3,000 pre-owned and vintage luxury watches while also storing your collection, including details of condition, box, and papers. Finally, stay in touch with me, my team, and our entire family of WatchBox client advisors around the world. I'm Tim, and I'll see you on the app. Hi, I'm Tim, and welcome to WatchBox New York. Every watch collector has, if you will, a narrative arc. A beginning, a middle, and an anticipated destination. And while they're all intriguing, some are meteoric, like the rise of a ballistic missile. Today, by the rocket's red glare, I welcome back an old friend, Carlos. Good to have you back on the show.
My absolute pleasure, Tim. Thank you for having me.
Now, we knew each other back in my South Florida days, and your South Florida days continue, but I was brand new to this video shtick, and you weren't yet a committed collector. Tell me about those early years when you were, I guess, maybe on the outside looking in.
No doubt. It was quite an impact because I had recently moved to the States from Venezuela, where I'm from, and it was a period of getting stabilized into my new life, if you will, and also starting to get it back in touch into my original, let's say, collector idea of continue buying new watches. The thing is that, you know, trying to stabilize yourself into a new country, polishing your English, a new language, there's so many things going on, and then you have priorities. So I was like, well, I don't have the money right now to buy the watches that I really love, but it was always very clear the day that I do, what is it the type of collection that I want to have? Because in my opinion, your collection tells you way more about who you are and your personality and the type of person that you are or you want to be.
So while you were getting your footing in the United States, it's important to look back even to what came prior to that, because you're originally from Venezuela, from Caracas.
Correct.
And in your earliest iteration as a watch enthusiast, you actually got started with Fossil, didn't you?
Correct. Funny enough, that was my first big attraction for watches, and it wasn't because of the watch itself, but it's just how enamored I was by the design of this strange object that I saw in a vitrine one day in the Aventura Mall in Florida, and I told my mom, "Mommy, I want to have this watch."
And how old were you at this point?
I was 6 years old. You know, and she's like, a watch? And she's like, okay, you can decide between that watch or getting, I don't know, a console, Nintendo, whatever it was. And I said, no, this is definitely it. There's something about it that I love.
Now, you are an entrepreneur. You've been involved in finance and marketing and even a little bit of manufacturing. And as you found success in business, you started to think about how you actually wanted to start a high luxury collection. What was that foundational piece? Where did it really begin?
I think that the first real calling for me was seeing a watch that my father always used, which is a watch that we have here today. It's a 17,000 Rolex Osyterquartz. That was like my first big impression into watches. And I said to myself, I really want to have something that, you know, it gets close to that emotion of having a fully integrated metal bracelet, and that's when the Formula One Tag Heuer quartz movement that I have here today, it came everything together with this watch. I still have it in its original condition, only serviced, I think, once, but never polished or anything. And that is a watch that accompanied me since I was 11 or 12 years old, all the way to now. You know, it really caught my attention, the purity of the design, the little pop-up of the red color into the dial, the rotating bezel. Then again, back in the day, I really didn't know how to use it. And then by trial and error, I'm like, oh, well, this is like a timer.
I have to compliment you on your foresight to realize from your first watch that you're not supposed to polish things if they don't really need it.
Indeed. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a tool, like a proper tool that it helped me to use to see time. But at the same time, I kind of like the roughness of a watch that is not fully polished. And at the same time, for some reason, this watch didn't get scratched a lot.
It is rather remarkably unmarred.
Yeah.
But, you know, there is that sense of like a kind of a wabi-sabi philosophy of comfort with imperfection and not needing to make it look new.
Correct. Yeah, because making it look new, what is the difference between that and what you're going to see out of a store, out of a vitrine? It doesn't make much of a difference. With this, I can call it my own.
Exactly. I've always thought the scratches sort of tell your story. It's one thing if you break a sapphire or put a big dent in a case, but the marks of wear, it's almost like a badge of honor. I wear my watches.
Indeed. I have scars, and I'm more than proud to share them with the world. Why am I not going to do that with my watch?
Now, you were talking about full integrated bracelet,
Yes.
17,000, Rolex Osyterquartz Datejust.
Correct.
Is this the watch?
That is the watch. And interestingly enough, I mentioned this in the past, but the story behind the philosophy of my father giving a watch to every one of his children by the time of graduation of college was always something sustained. He will go for Rolex or Tudor, which is, you know, the foundation of his knowledge into watches. And I never received mine. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Am I being scammed? Because I'm being the only one really showing interest from very early on in life about collecting watches, about loving watches. And, you know, long story short, me and my family, we had to leave Venezuela. And my father had to leave first. And then we jumped into a conversation on the internet over Skype or whatever it was. And he told me, I know that this is something like not letting you sleep well because I know you very well, but I didn't want to give you the watch just as is. We sent it to service, we sent it to Switzerland, we got all the archive papers, and now this is your watch, which is my personal watch, instead of just buying me something brand new. So that made all the time waiting, all this speculation about why I'm not getting a watch, all time worth. Into this iteration that is a watch that it will forever be with me, and it will be passing down as an heirloom into my future family. But regardless of that, I think that what my father always saw is that infatuation that I have with watches, and also my own character, that he saw him being reflected upon me time and time again. So he said, I think that it's more fitting for you to have my watch than just to get you anything else.
Yeah, you got a lovely tritium Buckley dial. I mean, honestly, these are such unique watches with the combination of the reference printed externally.
Correct.
How much wrist time does this still get?
Well, not so much. I think that, by my collection growing and just, evolving into different type of time watches, I think that I have reserved that for special occasions, for time with family. I don't really want to carry and bang it out, even though that as soon as I received that watch was with me day in and day out.
Now, I know exactly how you feel. I have a grandpa watch, and it is like a piece of his legacy to me, and it comes out for the most special occasions. But here's the thing. My grandpa's watch is not necessarily the style of watch that I would pick for myself. I love it because it reminds me of him. And I think it's probably similar with that. You love it because it has the family associations.
No doubt.
How did you strike out on your own and start forging your own vision of what a luxury watch should be to you?
Very good question. And I think that the simplest way that I can tell you is, number one, it will have to have a story. Story and emotional connection for me was quite significant attachment to whatever decision I will make financially into a watch. And because it will have to speak to me. if it didn't speak to me, if it was like a hype or something like that, the further away I will position myself. And this is not me trying to be a contrarian, trying to be, the weird, oddball type of person. It was just organic that it went that way. And one of the first brands that started talking to me in that regard was, that we can see right here, is Jaeger-LeCoultre. And I got to give a lot of credit also to you, because you also transmit a lot of your love for the watchmakers brand, and that was actually the watch that you're holding was my first Jaeger-LeCoultre ever. And I gotta say, full circle again, it is bought through what is today called WatchBox. Back in the day, What You Want.
What you want.
Yeah.
Woo. Represent.
So here we are.
It's funny, too, because when I first went down to interview for my job with Watch You Want in 2014, I wore a JLC because at the time I had the Amvox 2, and I'm like, well, it's red, it's white, and it's black, and that's their corporate colors, so hopefully they'll notice.
Yeah, the Master Compressor GMT was the first, let's say, heavy hitter, if you will, of watches that I ever bought with my own money. That was already being in Miami. I fall in love with it because out of every single, I heard your voice every time that I was trying to make a decision into putting the trigger into one of these watches. And I remember you saying, this is the type of watch that it will serve you for any kind of occasion, because it's a proper workhorse, but at the same time, it's slim enough and small enough that you can wear it as a dress watch if you have, a substantial wrist size. And it certainly did that to me. And it has changed strap. Now we have it on this color, caramel color strap, but that watch has seen so many hours on my wrist and has seen so many different horizons, because it has traveled with me as properly intended as a GMT throughout all over the world with me. And I cannot, that is a watch that it will also remain in my collection forever.
Did you know right from the outset that you wanted a JLC travel watch, or did you just decide that the Master Compressor GMT was the best looking watch that met your aesthetic standards?
I think it was a little bit of a combination of both, because this is the only Master Compressor that came with only one crown. So for me, that having to evaluate a watch that I will have more than one crown at this size, because of course we had the diver and whatnot that you could go for, but those were a little bit more, gargantuan in size.
Yes.
Those were 44, even though titanium and whatnot, that will not serve a purpose of being this multidisciplinary type of watch. This one fit every single box. And on top of that, yeah, I did a lot of travel, and I lived in Miami. I went to the water with the watch, so I needed to have something that it will compile of that usage. That a lot of people tend to go for bigger, more established brands, if you will, in the market, like a Rolex Submariner of Omega Seamaster. I decided to go for this.
It's interesting to me that your interest almost from the outset of collecting was high horology. You do have a Rolex, but it's a hereditary piece. It's a family watch with separate meaning. You knew you wanted to go for JLC, you wanted to go for Vacheron, you wanted to go for AP. You didn't race to the nearest Rolex AD and ask them what they had in the case.
That is correct.
So now you actually have an interesting theme within a theme, because you are collecting the Vacheron Overseas, but a specific generation and exhaustively. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, indeed. That was actually my one of the following big purchases that I ever did. And it was because I was trying to decide out of the Trinity brands which way to go. You had the very coveted and still very coveted Nautilus from Patek Philippe, the 5711, or any other variation, even the Aquanauts, or you had obviously the Royal Oak, which we have an iteration here today. But out of that everyday Trinity watch, it was always so surprising to me that objectively the most special, the less produced, and the most technically, in the sense of prowess, of technicality, that ever pack a punch was the Overseas. And also because of the design style. I always combine those two. They need to make sense. They need to resonate, if you will. So I went for the limited edition yellow hands that you're holding on your right hand. And then later on, I said, they're so different in the design space. And for a brand like Vacheron to do something so quirky, to putting yellow or red into their watches and whatnot, and being the one that produces the least amount of watches out of the entire Trinity, I had to have it. And I decided fairly later on after that first purchase that I wanted to really pursue to buy every single second generation overseas, at least right now the ones that you're holding are the chronographs. And it's mostly because even though that I respect and I like what they did on the third generation, it doesn't speak to me in the sense of different reasons, but mostly design-wise, the fact that they removed the big date complication into it, the fact that this one is significantly slimmer than the current
Very
production
much.
watch, and it has a level of technicality for the price that you could get one of these watches that is unheard of in the entire community of Trinity watches. And to add a layer into that, someone very, very interesting, very famous into this community and into this brand, Christian Simoni, Director of Design and Heritage for Vacheron Constantin, was super kind enough to me to do as a gift the yellow strap that you're holding there. And he told me, listen, I'm doing this for you because I was knocking at the door asking for a proper vulcanized rubber strap in yellow. And they told me, I'm sorry, Carlos, we cannot do that, but we can do something different. And that was the result of it. And now I'm expanding that into the entire collection, making each color for each of the limited editions, the yellow with the yellow hands, the red with the red hands, and now the blue with the blue dial, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that I'm extremely fortunate for that, extremely lucky for that. And that's one of the extra layers that I can put into a brand like Vacheron Constantin that I will always love.
It's also super cool to hear anecdotes like that where someone who's really powerful and influential at a big group-owned brand does something really nice for an individual collector. It flies in the face of that whole notion that independents are soulful and attentive and group brands are soulless and corporate. There's a lot of complexity, and there are people who love watchmaking and watch collectors at Vacheron.
Agreed, absolutely.
Did you go from the Overseas to the 1942, or was that a detour?
No, that's actually correct. I wanted to continue my route into the collection onto something a little bit more complicated. I'm the type of person that love calendars, albeit most calendars are not that well either made or they need a lot of time to be repaired, whatever it is. But once I saw this complete package of the historic piece that you're holding right now into that 4400 caliber, for me was a no-brainer. And also, another story attached to this watch came about because today one of my business partners was a master watchmaker for Vacheron Constantin in Miami, and he was the one convincing me, you should get this watch because of X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, if he says it and the fact that it also talks to me, I gotta have it. Having a stainless steel piece with this level of detail on the case never made my Vacheron until, only precious metal. I gotta have it.
And that's funny, you bring in Judd Wood. We'll talk more about him a little bit later. It's another guy who crossed paths with us back in our South Florida days. Now, the thing about your watches is that you do spread it around. You've got a couple of different brands, a couple of different styles. You've only actually got one Audemars Piguet that I can see here, but my gosh, if you're going to go for a Royal Oak, a perpetual calendar jumbo, that's the way to do it. What is it you love about this generation?
Agreed. I think that the elegance in the sense of not just the design of it, but proportions is something that really speaks to me. This is a jumbo size 39 millimeters that actually wears as a proper 39 millimeters in a sense. With an integrated bracelet, that's a little bit difficult. We were chatting a little bit about it. But again, going into the more obscure SQ, if you will, of a collection, this is a very different type of approach for this particular watch because not a lot of people really liked it at the beginning. The main focus has been the skeletonized dials and the weird limited production watches. And for me, this is significantly more legible than any of those watches. Number two, it has a combination of metals that is also very weird. It's platinum and stainless steel. So you put it on, I can go into the water with it. I don't do it that much, but you could. But at the same time, you have that weight. It's a little nice reminder that you have something very special on your wrist. I think the fact that the base caliber that he uses is also something to boast about. And also, very interestingly, the black rotor.
Yes.
Something very strange into most watches, but specifically into a Royal Oak. I said to myself, this was a pickup in an auction house that I got it, and since then, love it.
This is the 25820?
Correct.
And for a lot of folks out there who might be struggling to see what Carlos means about the metals, the bezel as well as the bracelet intermediate links are all polished platinum. It's probably the world's most subtle ever two-tone watch.
Pretty much, and you can tell because of the gleaming shine of the platinum is so different from the brush type of absorbent of light of the stainless steel that is a little notch that the people who knows and the people who doesn't, they don't really pay attention to it, which is kind of hard with these type of watches nowadays not to pay attention to it. But yeah, I like that. I like the inside bezel type of conversation.
Plus, you have such an appreciation for Jaeger-LeCoultre and, of course, the JLC base movement.
Correct.
The beating heart of this jumbo.
Indeed.
Now, most of your watches that I could see here, most of them, are complicated. What's fascinating to me is you actually have two in here from classical brands and long-running model families that are about as simple as you can get. What drew you to the Tank Cintrée and the JLC Reverso Tribute Small Second?
I think that these are, in a way, and this is what it has become an amalgamation of my today's philosophy for collecting, is all about what is the best expression of the most iconic watch that a brand can make in the most simple form, which it is the Reverso. Not much needs to be said about it. Is the most iconic watch from the manufacturer. Is an icon of Art Deco that you very well know that I love that time period of design. And the Cintrée, the same thing, is the most quintessential show of design cue from Cartier. Also beautiful into the watchmaking being this modern iteration of the watch. I'm a little bit careful into vintage, so that's when this little puppy really caught my attention. And I said to myself, if I'm gonna have one or two Cartiers, this is one of them. This is one of the most iconic. I have the resize for it, that it looks quite well, if I may say myself. And I think that the color combination, as you can tell, I don't go so much for color metals. The simplicity of this, I said it is a match made in heaven.
And I do think of the 2018 Cintrée collection. This combination of the red gold and the black dial is just so powerful. It's got a lot of punch.
It really is. And for a watch that it takes so much real estate into it, for myself, the least amount of complication, the better. It tells more of the story.
Also, a lot of fun. You mentioned that JLC is the watchmaker's watchmaker. Case in point, the Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar, JLC base movement. Obviously, the Reverso and the Master Compressor, JLC. And the Cintrée, JLC.
Correct.
849 base movement in there.
Indeed.
Now, I do have to ask, because you have a refined taste in the high end, this is a little bit of an odd man out. Baume Mercier, where did this come from? Because I'm sure this has a story.
Indeed, it has. Thankfully, the entire collection over here it has. This one came about when I was 14 years old, going to 15. And I asked my Mom, I have saved some money. And I would really like a mechanical watch, because this was that connection between my initial watch, the Heuer Formula one, into mechanical world. I really wanted to have something mechanical, something automatic, something a little bit more different, but at the same time with that concept that I can wear it down or wear it up because of the water resistance. And that one came about. I saw that in Aruba in a family trip, and my mom was like, yeah, it looks beautiful. It is very classic. She still saw me as a weirdo, because it's like, why a kid of 14 years old is looking for something that looks more proper into a 50-something-year-old man in a boardroom. And she's like, listen, if you really like it and you're gonna hold it dear and you're gonna take care of it, for sure, I'll put the other half into the watch. And that's how that watch came about, and it has my mom name printed into the whole thing.
And I think think that's really cool because we've heard a lot of stories along the lines of, I got a watch from my grandpa, I got a watch from my dad. Now you've got your original fossil, but also this Baume Mercier, and both of those are very closely tied to memories of being with your mother.
Correct, indeed, and that's why I always say I wouldn't be here without them. Evidently, in a more metaphoric way, but also in a formulaic way. Realistically, I wouldn't be here without their support, and this is something that they really pass on. Even though neither of them are watch collectors or collectors in general, I always had that love for taste and love for different things that they really imprinted in me. And from there on, it was just like, okay, you love this hobby, you love this, you have a very good taste. This is very expensive. This is the moment that we draw the line on the floor. This is all you, and this is where we are today.
I think it's really cool that both your mama and your dad sort of helped guide your taste and your ultimate trajectory towards becoming part of the watch fraternity. And I've often said that collectors who have a refined taste know what they like, but collectors who have the most refined taste are able to envision something they would like, but which does not yet exist. And this is sort of the root of where MEC Watches started.
Correct.
Just prior to the pandemic, you had this germ of an idea that wasn't the beginning. Why did you first have the notion that you wanted to create your own watch?
Pretty good question, and it's it's interesting because that idea never really cemented into my head until very late on. The first time that someone kind of like knocked at my door telling me maybe you should do something about it was back in the days when I was still a resident of Miami, Florida, and I had a very nice invitation for a dinner with Max Busser. And back in the day, I was consulting the brand FP Journe, and he was asking me, what would you do differently if you were, at the helm of making the decisions and whatnot? He asked me all these questions from a person that has this level of experience, not just working with independents, but creating his own brand. That he says to me, I think that you have a chip on your shoulder in a way, that you would like to do something different. Why don't you just give it a try? Why don't you do a design and just put a watch out there? And I laugh because I'm like, you know how difficult that is, especially me being here in America, being an American. That's a big challenge, but that was the inception of the idea. That was that splinter that kept in my head bugging me until one day of February of 2020, I immediately called one of my business partners, Eric, and I said to him, bro, let's sit down, let's talk. I have some crazy idea. He's like, yeah, sure, come to my place. We sit down that day, and I said, dude, I'm planning to do this. I would really, much prefer for you to be part of this. And he's like, okay, yeah, sure, let's do it. And I said, okay, now we have one last component, which is the watchmaker, because I need to go hand in hand with a proper watchmaker. And that's the moment that I call Judd out of Miami. And I said, man, I'm pretty sure that you have heard this many times, people telling you, let's start a watch brand. But let's start a watch brand. And it's coming from me, and this is the idea, and I'm planning to do so and so, because from the very beginning, day one, I imagined how the brand I wanted, what it was, the complication that I watched that we wanted to do, and that they cemented the start of MEC Watches.
And so Eric is very focused on design. He's an artist, internationally recognized. He's exhibited. You have a background in business, plus, again, that refined taste in watches. And then Judd, he's worked for UN, Vacheron, and FP Journe.
Correct.
So was there ever any conflict over what the watch would look like, or were you very much the captain of the ship on that front?
I think, well, it was quite interesting, because from the very beginning, once I mentioned that I wanted to do a jump hour, we were pretty much immediately locked into this idea. We all knew that what we wanted to do, and once an idea came about that someone had very strong ties into, all right, let's do it. That was the best way.
And I really appreciate that you decided to go with a smoked sapphire dial, because it fixes the two main aesthetic issues with a jump hour. The first is always that the hour is displayed in some tiny frame or aperture,
correct,
and most of the dial goes unused. And because of that first problem, you wind up with the second, which is that all of that unused expanse with the little aperture winds up making it look like a bathroom scale.
You couldn't be more closer than the truth. And I think that stylistically it was, point by point, everything that you just mentioned, but also, again, trying to be different. And the fact that you can make a complication so artistical, like a jump hour, into something that it looks a little bit more modern, but at the same time, also having the opportunity of showcasing your prowess as a creative of a completely in-house movement, it was going to be a disservice not to do it that way, at the very least with the first watches. That's why we also kept the running second disc into the dial, and we made also something very funky, very different with the minute hand. It was all about being different, being easily recognizable, and at the end of the day, trying to create from zero a potential DNA of a multiple series or multiple different models of a company that is just starting. We wanted to make it very clear that we're here to stay, and it's a statement about us being trying to be very unique and being our own.
So now the watch itself was built very compact. Most jump hours of the modern era, from everyone along the lines of Pierre Kunz and beyond, they've been fairly large timepieces. And we've seen that with alternative time display watches, there seems to be some inclination toward bloat, whether that's with MCT or HYT or even something affordable like Gorilla.
Yeah.
You wind up with a very big watch. You really wanted to hold the line on size.
No doubt. I think that a good exemplification of that is my collection, and also the collection of my other two partners is size. You need to draw a line on the sand, because you also want to be able for everyone to enjoy your watch. And when your watch is not just 42 or 44 millimeters, but at the same time it has a thickness of, above 13 millimeters, then it becomes a little bit daring to wear a watch like that. Someone with a smaller wrist wouldn't be able to wear it. And also for our own sensitivity, from day one we said, the idea is not to try to make money out of this, is to create a watch that we love, that we are going to enjoy, and that we will put our money if someone else were to make it. So it was immediately said, we don't want to make a big watch. We want to make it, and that's where we kept the idea of 39 millimeters. And also something that, as you can tell, I wear a lot of tight type of shirts on the wrist, and something that you could immediately go underneath a shirt or a dress scarf or a jacket, and that's why we kept it at 9.5 millimeter. That was a big challenge, as you can tell out of the watch and knowing the complication, because it's a very three-dimensional complication. You have this, you have the hand, you have all the jumping mechanism that also takes a lot of the space, but that's also one of the main reasons why we were so keen into going fully in-house. We didn't want to use a module. We integrated the entire complication onto the main plate on the dial side of it, and this is the end result. And I think that it's very legible, it's very easy to read, very easy to understand, but it's fun in the sense that there's no lack of mobility. There's a lot of motion, there's a lot of dynamics going around. And into a watch like this, I think that that's necessary.
Without a doubt, Pierre Kunz would often include a retrograding second or a retrograding 30-second with a jump hour. And of course, a lot of the Gerald Genta retrograde by retrograde arena models, even some of the Quattro Retro chronographs, had a lot of visible action on the dial side. I'm impressed that you were able to build out the module on one side of the base plate, and then the base movement itself sits on the other side. So instead of having two plates pressed together with independent movements, it's really just a double-sided movement.
Indeed, that's what it is. And understanding that we were facing a market where being American, even though that we are extremely proud of it, and that's why we did the watch the way that we did it, not cutting any corners, it is not common, and we were very realistic from the very beginning. We were gonna face some interaction with certain people that might not believe 100% that we here in America, we Americans had and creativity could do something of these sorts. But having that concept, that's why we went all the way in, and we decided not to compromise. This is a second iteration of the watch without still being delivered the single first piece, because we decided to take our time to try to come up with the best version of it before starting delivery and start assembly and whatnot, which we're doing here in the States. Assembly, regulation, and quality control, on top of being hand delivered all the pieces. But to put an extra, the extra yard that we wanted to push forward to show people we are here in the most serious way. We are putting our name into the dial. So this is no joke matter at all.
Yeah, the M and the E stand for microengineering, so a lot of investment went into this. But you were talking to me before about how Christian Salmoni, who's creative director at Vacheron, went out of his way to get you a strap, and that really made an impression. And you were talking about the human aspect of starting a brand and how you're going to hand deliver the watches?
Correct. And I think that if you don't continue having that human contact with people, then it's just a commodity. It's just, a very pretty watch that people can just order online, put it on Instagram, and maybe, in the flash of the moment, you're going to be so, enamored by it. But after 3 or 6 months or whoever, a small fraction of time, people are going to just go into the next new thing, right? So if you want to create something that is going to be long-lasting, it takes about 8 years to establish yourself as a brand. But you only have one time to make a first impression. And that first impression is going to be that time that we hand deliver these watches. I want to be able to shake hands with every single of our collectors, for them to know me, for them to have FaceTime with me, to have a proper conversation with me, to share a meal and whatnot, and to also understand their ideas, to also hear them out about what they think about the watch, or maybe what they think about the strap, or what they think about the presentation, because this will be a very collaborative effort. They're helping us to kickstart the company. So it's the bare minimum that we can do out of respect to them.
And so initially it's going to be direct sales from MEC.
Correct.
It's going to be 50 pieces. That's going to be sort of a founder series, a souscription?
Correct. We took a little bit of a notch into the page of one of my all-time heroes, François Paul Jean, and we decided to name it a souscription, which is effectively converting into a Kickstart option of it. And only this watch, this initial 50 pieces, will be in stainless steel case, and the entire construction of the moment is made out of German silver or Mercier, depending where you are. And these sort of a combination of metals and even details into the watch, or maybe exactly the same design of the watch without trying to facelift or anything, will be only in this subscription. Once those 50 pieces are out and about, we will never make this combination ever again. In a sense of respecting the exclusivity of the people that trust us. And also to keep only for every subscription launch edition that we're gonna do on every single new series of our watches in the watch company, we're gonna make it with this very special combination of metals.
So now before we talk a little bit about bringing back American watchmaking and the aspects that are going to be U.S. focused on that front, let's talk a bit about the price, because a lot of folks are going to say, Tim, 21,000 Swiss francs is a lot of money, and it is. And they're going to say, this is essentially a 3-hand watch, jump hour, minutes, running seconds. Tell me a bit about the finishing of the movement, the low production volumes, some of the artisanal element, like creating the minute hand, that actually add up to that 21,000.
Yeah, makes sense. And for sure that not a single penny of that is coming to our pockets, because first of all, R&D, a completely in-house movement, is a notoriously very expensive endeavor. Hiring different type of people, hiring the R&D people, hiring a project manager. So there's a couple hands involved. The time imposed into this is not a matter of months, it's a matter of years in order to develop something like this. And then you gotta develop also the case and develop the hands and whatnot. And then when you start also bringing in the materials, we have a plethora of materials here. We have German silver, we have stainless steel, we have sapphire, we have a minute hand that it takes 17 hours in hand decoration in order not to break it, because it has a complete hole in the middle in order for you to see the actual jump at 60. minutes every time that the watch
And
is
it's a
going to change.
sapphire hand.
It is a sapphire hand, but we, on top of that character, we decided to make a hole in the middle for two reasons. One is stylistically evoking a little bit of the Chrysler building here in New York, and number two, once the jump of the hour happens, for people not to have any kind of like obscure side of that happening. Once you take all that into consideration, doing prototypes. Each prototype costs a lot of money because this is a one-time, one-off type of watch that you're creating 3 times or 4 times. And then once we are achieved that first prototype, then you need to we end up making about 46 improvements into the watch, not just stylistically. This is a 30% slimmer case from the original watch. So it goes into so much detail and time dealing with 16 different providers that we have that overall, we're not making much of a profit here, if any. And then when you start putting up the presentation, paperwork that we're doing, some second generation printer out of here in New York in Brooklyn.
The box and the papers themselves are being done artisanally.
Correct. And then bringing back one of the topics that we were talking before, this will be a hand-delivered watch. So once you compile all this, it's more about the investment that we are making for future-proofing the company, future-proofing the watches, and offering 2 years warranty. So that is the main reason why the 21,000 is actually not positively impactful for us into our pockets. Not at all.
And I think it's important to mention to folks who are not in the industry that sometimes it costs just as much to tool up for 5,000 watches as it costs to tool up for 50. You have to buy all the tooling, and that's amortized over the number of units made, and you're making 50. Now, it's interesting because you've described some of the design elements on the dial, the case, and the movement as neo-Art Deco, and I definitely see it. Your inspiration is rooted equally in New York and Miami, and it
Correct.
says as much on the case back. But more broadly, you're looking at sort of an American watchmaking comeback story. The parts are made in Switzerland, but you're taking care to bring as much of the assembly, adjustment, the service, and someday the development itself back to the United States.
Yeah, that's a dream, right? Right now, what we can offer is full assembly, regulation, and quality control here in the States, but with the aims into the future to start reinvesting into the company to buy our own CNC machines, lathes, and many other components and machinery that is needed to have a proper manufacturer facility, a proper atelier. Are we going to be making 100% of the watch here? Hopefully, but we're being very realistic. Just the fact that we can make 20-30% of the watch here is a big win, all the way up to making the 100. But in the meantime, we're going to try to do as best as we can, as much as we can here in the States. For example, our partner making the straps is based out of the States. Our paperwork is made out of the States. All the capital funding this initial jump of the company come from our pockets, come from the States. There's no big conglomerate, there's no big VC firm giving us the money and go ahead and go wild with it. No. This is our own sweat and tears going into this. And again, by the time that we have enough capital, that will be the dream, to open that first big atelier in the States. Not saying that there's none right now, but maybe not in the way that we want to make it.
I'm going to ask you 2 more questions, and one is always standard for collectors who come on because I want to ask you about future ambitions. And I was going to ask you what your Grail watch would be within the scope of a collection, but I'd rather ask you, what is the Grail watch you'd envision for MEC? 10, 15 years down the line, you've got your own atelier here, master watchmakers, Judd's building perpetual calendars, tourbillon, minute repeaters. You're fully tooled up. What does your Grail level MEC look like?
That's a very cool and astute question. And I can tell you that I'm a big fan of calendars, but there's something about the simplicity of a watch that I always have in my heart. And I hope someday I can put it into my collection. But that will draw a lot of the inspiration that I have for that big Grail watch, at least for me. Maybe Eric or maybe Judd, they have their own. But for me, it's something along the lines of the Ibris Mechanica 11 from Jaeger-LeCoultre, right? And with that smile, you know where I'm coming from. It's a ultra thin watch that if you see it from a distance, it's not gonna tell you absolutely anything. The majority of people, you can be sitting on the subway and they're gonna pass by it and they don't understand what that is or what the cost it is or how difficult that watch is to make. But to have an ultra thin peripheral rotor automatic flying tourbillon minute repeater in such a compact and beautiful nonsense type of design is what really drives me to someday do something of those sorts that I wish that I can, bring that level of complication into something that we make ourselves with our own sensitivity, our own design. But I think that at least for me, for Carlos, it will be something that it could be flying under the radar. But if you open the hood of that beast, you know what you're dealing with.
Very cool. And you were talking about wanting to hold the line on thickness and also an interest in peripheral rotors. So now I know where it leads.
There you go.
So now the other question becomes, given that you haven't started deliveries yet,
Yes.
folks want to get in on this or at least talk to you and understand it better. Where do they find you?
They can go to mecwatches.com. They can also follow us on Instagram at MEC Watches. They can, follow our individual accounts, my account, Eric's or Judd. But definitely we're more than welcome and always open to having any kind of conversation. If anyone reaches out to you, you know where to find me. But I think that that's an integral part of everything that we're doing. I want people to know what they're getting into. I know that they have their own motivations, as well as I have my own motivation creating my own collection and then creating the company with my partners. To go in fully aware of what is it that they're doing, what that means, what they are also investing into. This is, I hope that people see it as what it is, or at least the way that we envision it. This is bigger than us. This is bigger than just MEC. This is bigger than just a jump hour or trying us to create something out of our own sensitivity. This is something that it also appeals to the person that is willing to and wants to put some sort of investment into American watchmaking, because that's what we want to become, and we want to become the spearhead into American watchmaking with everything that entails. We're here for it. We're here for the long run, and we want to make this successful in every single way possible.
Well, I look forward to having a discussion about those future watches and also seeing the assembled entirety of the second generation Vacheron Overseas.
You got yourself a proximal date. Let's do that.
Okay, we won't wait 7 years to do the next one.
Let's definitely not do that.
Time out, Tim out, Carlos out, and thanks for logging on.